What's going up, YouTube? Welcome to another edition of Tips on the Beat with D.Royul, where I, D.Royul, will be making a beat, and I'm going to give you 5 insights into how I made it to hopefully give you some new insight into how you make music in your own life. Today's beat is going to be a bit somber. It's not upbeat, it's not fast or anything like that. Diversity in music creation, there's nothing wrong with that. And personally, I like to be able to make music from a wide range of styles. EDM, hip-hop, pop, soul, reggae, stuff like that. And this one is a bit more dramatic. So with drama comes a lot of new techniques into making the instruments sound a different way and into beat patterns and such like that. So today is going to be a different type of beat, and let's see how it came together. All right, everybody. Tip number 1, keep introducing new items throughout the track. There's no reason that it has to show up again. There's no reason that it has to continue at all. These sounds that I just entered, those wave sounds and the bark sound, I'm using those for dramatic effect. So I'm never going to use them again. And it's okay to do that when you're sculpting a sound or you're sculpting an emotion. Do what you have to do to get it exactly what you want it to be. All right, guys, tip number 2, dry and wet contrast on your instruments in the track. What it is the amount of reverb is considered either dry or wet. If there's no reverb, it's considered dry. If there's a lot of reverb, it's considered wet. What I've done is I've played around with the amount of reverb on my different tracks. Sometimes you use the same amount of reverb throughout the entire amount of instruments you're using when you want to create uniformity. But to shape the dark feel or the somber feel that I'm going with this, my piano has a different reverb than my drums. And even in the drums, the one snare as well as whatever other snare I put in there, they have 2 different reverbs on them. And I put a delay on the snare and all these different things so that I'm playing around with the contrast between the dry and the wetness of each of the instruments. And it's coming together, of course, but this kind of mindset takes me out of the normalcy of having, let's say, a reverb set at, let's say, 10, and all of the instruments getting it at 10. So for this, one's at 10, one's at 50, one's at 0. Play around with it. Don't be afraid to play around and to get creative until it sounds exactly how you want it to. All right, everybody. Tip number 3, low pass filter use. Now, to help you understand what the difference between high and low pass, whatever word you say, that's what you're letting pass through. So if it's a high pass filter, that means the high frequencies come through. And since I'm talking about a low pass filter, the lower frequencies pass through. Now with that snare sound that I just put in, I put a low pass filter on it, meaning the high frequency sounds are not through it. And I'm going to show you what that looks like in the equalizer. As you hear, that's the snare sound I've got going. And this is the equalizer, where this is the high pass filter shape I've used. So what it is the frequency, or the hertz, everything above, what is this at? 3,350 hertz. Everything above that I took out. And that means all of the rest of this sound range is being let through. So that's why it sounds like it's kind of in a tunnel and kind of muffled. And when you do a low pass filter, that's the sound you get. And I could lower it some more. Oh, here you go. And now we're past the frequency range that the sound is making. So that's why you don't hear it at all. And now it's back. All right, tip number 4, when to be busy and when to be simple. When you're doing a track like this and you want it to be melancholy, contemplative, solemn, dark, or such, you have to know when enough is enough sometimes. I like to put a lot in my tracks, I do. But I learned early on through some mentors of mine that when you want someone to be able to sing on it or rap on it, you need to give them space to do so. And so what I did was just a few things layering on top of the piano track that I have. And that's essentially it. I'm not doing much else to this track because I recognize this track needs to be simple to be able to convey the emotion that I want it to. So sometimes you're going to have to keep it simple in order to be able to make it the track exactly how you want it. And tip number 5, one-time use of instruments and sounds can be all you need sometimes. Very similar to number 1 of how you keep introducing new things into the song. Number 5 is once you introduce it, never go back to it again. Why? Sometimes it keeps your listener engaged and they're wondering if it's going to come back again. When you introduce something new, it once again grabs their attention. If it fits what you're trying to do with the track, like I just did with that little harp sound, it's perfectly fine. Just know it doesn't always do a detriment to your track when you're introducing new things at a slower rate, keeping it simple, but you're still bringing in new ideas so that the listener is engaged with your track and that the emotion that you're trying to get across is being gotten across. And there we have it. Another Tips on the Beat is in the books. Now let's go over the 5 things I talked about in this video. Number 1. Nope. And there you have it. Another Tips on the Beat is in the books. Now let's take a look at the 5 things that I went over in this episode. Number 1, keep introducing new items. This makes your beat very diverse. It makes it unique. It makes people still listening. Nope. We'll try one more time. And there you have it. Another Tips on the Beat is in the books. Now let's go back over the 5 things I talked about in this episode. 1, keep introducing new items on the track as it goes along. It keeps your listener engaged, and it creates a style on the track to let someone know that this is more cinematic or that this is telling a story through the whole thing. Number 2, dry and wet contrast, meaning having reverb on some instruments and not on others is a nice way to create a track that gives off emotion, both of darkness or emotion that's heavily deep or saddened, because a lot of reverb creates a space of like being in a forest or in a cathedral or something like that. But when it's also dry, it makes the listener have to think while they're listening. Number 3, low pass filter use. Low pass filters takes out the high parts of sounds. So it's a lot more of the thud or the middle part of the sound quality. So if you ever hear songs where it seems to ramp up from the bottom and then it gets higher, so to speak, that's because they're using a low pass filter and you're just hearing the part of it. Number 4, when to be busy and when to be simple. There's nothing wrong with being simple and there's nothing wrong with being busy. But if you're creating a track and you're making it a specific emotion, you have to know when just putting maybe 2 instruments into place is enough and when having 16 tracks is useful. Now, the track we were doing today, not having too much, keeping it simple, that was the beneficial thing for what we were doing in this track. And number 5, one-time use for your instruments is definitely a viable thing. It's very similar to introducing something new as you go throughout the whole track, which was tip number 1. When you do things for one-time use, you never come back to it. It was just something you put in there, and that's it. And it makes your listener keep guessing. It makes them keep thinking and keep listening. And that's always a beneficial thing when you're trying to connect with your listener. So thank you so much for watching this video. Remember, everybody, creativity has no boundaries. Use your God-given gifts and talents to create something fresh today, but always make sure you're having fun while you're doing it. See you next time.